Greetings and welcome to another episode of the Hourlings Podcast Project. My name is Martin Wilsey. Thanks for stopping in. Tonight our topic is our favorite science fiction stories. And tonight Dave's going to be in charge. Dave, go for it.
All right. As Marty said, our favorite science fiction stories. Each participant here was asked to come up with 3 stories that they were going to recommend. The only criteria was that they had to be science fiction. I know that one of us is actually going to include some short stories in the mix. So without further ado, let's start with Marty. Let's hear your 3.
Okay, so my 3, I picked them based on lots of criteria. These, I can't actually call this list the best, most well-written classics on science fiction. They're the ones that I just enjoy the hell out of them. Okay. So number 1 on my list is Robert Heinlein's A Moon is a Hearth's Mistress. Now this book, it still holds up. I read this as a teenager, and when the future was bright and men were walking on the moon and optimism was high. And the thing about this book is that it's about the colonization of the moon. And I won't give anything away by saying that it also has a big plot associated with a sentient AI, which speaks, largely to my own writing. So this not only inspired me a lot, it had a ton of things in it that were at the time, really, really super space age. Heinlein in this book invented the waterbed of all things. So it was just a lot of fun, good survival story, good character development, and great setting development. Particularly the way that he talked about colonizing Mars and how the people lived there, the way they built towns and cities inside lava tubes. I just love that. The detail of it is awesome. I read this book periodically. I now have the audiobook as well. So it's just really, really, really good. Highly recommend it.
I also want to add that it's the 1967 Hugo Award winner, where for those who don't know, the Hugo Awards are like the Oscars for science fiction. And it was written in 66. So having an AI in a story in 66, when PCs and such hadn't even been invented yet, that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, it was really big, and I can't believe how well it holds up too. And it's amazing to me the detail that he talked in the book about the effects of low gravity syndrome, the impact of living in a low gravity environment. And there's a lot of social, commentary and directions that society will go, as well as topics about freedom and about adventure. It's great. Mm-hmm. So the next one on my list is actually a series of books, and it's just pure fun books, is the Stainless Steel Rat books. I don't know if you've ever read any of these. I'm kind of cheating by picking a series, but the first book in the series is called The Stainless Steel Rat by Harry Harrison. What I love about this book is the main character, Slippery Jim DeGrees, who is this guy who lives in the sci-fi world of tomorrow, but he lives in the edges. He considers himself a stainless steel rat, and he gets all these adventures. And what I like about the character is that, he's kind of amoral, and I kind of like that. And he drinks a lot. He has a lot of fun, but he goes on adventures too. What are we gonna say, Dave?
I was gonna say he's a thief.
Yeah, he's a thief, and basically he gets caught, pressed into service. I don't want to give the plot away, but it's just really fun, and it's really funny. I started reading them again recently because I just reacquired them. I had lost them over the years, and started reading them. And it's really interesting how the computer technology is in that, and how they still use punch cards and stuff. It was really, really fun. It was, you know, he has this big thing where he's traveling incognito, and he is explaining to the reader, oh, you always have to buy a ticket from a destination farther than where you end up. And he talks about going into the bathroom and very carefully cutting out additional holes in the computer card that changed the destination on it and stuff. I mean, it's just really fun books, and crazy plots. I love the book that talks about time travel. You know, I always loved that, because he would constantly, you know, he'd be, you know, floating in outer space in a spacesuit, looking to witness an event, and suddenly his own self pops up next to him, and he's, you know, his own self says, "Oh, you idiot, you forgot this device. So here." He drops the device off and leaves. And he's like, wait a second. And then he figures out, oh, when this whole thing is over, I'm going to have to come back. And it's a lot of fun. So they are just, you know, just super ridiculous fun, good comedy, good science fiction, lots of action adventure, which is, you know, one of my favorite things. And my last one is a more contemporary title. It's called Quarter Share by Nathan Lowell. There is an entire series of books, Quarter Share, Half Share, in a whole bunch of books. And I love these books because it has a completely original take on the future. Future is not in space. It's not military. It's not battleships and cruisers and stuff like that. It's all commerce. And the main character in it is this guy who comes of age and has to get a job. And he gets a job working in the kitchen on a starship. And it's just how this guy starts advancing up the ladder as a spacer. And I am amazed how awesome I love these books. And it's really an original take, not only on science fiction, but it's an original take on story development without an antagonist. There's no villain, you know, unless you consider man against the environment, man against, you know, challenges of life kind of thing. But the books are really awesome. A guy I go camping with every summer recommended them to me, and I started plowing through them, and geez, I've read like everything he's ever written now. So that's how much I love those books. So those are my big three recommendations. I have a giant list of, you know, near mentions, which we can talk about at the end if there's any other ones that people want to mention.
Yeah, no, I'll second that last one. I feel like those books shouldn't work, but they totally do.
Totally do. I mean, and I love the character development in those books. Between the setting and the characters in it, and the challenges that they face. And the challenges are really, you know, like really super life-threatening and stuff. And they're still incredibly engaging. I highly recommend these books. Oh, and by the way, I've met Nathan Lowell. Cool dude, too. Very, very nice guy.
Also, Nathan Lowell is an independent publisher as well. So he's the one I often point to when somebody says, "Oh yeah, I don't read that that indie published stuff. I want to read good books." I go, "Have you tried out Nathan Lowell?"
Mm-hmm.
Love him, love it. I mean, there's, you know, and there's a ton of indie books that are just really, really great, and we can talk about that at the end. Honorable mentions.
All right, Shay, let's hear it. Let's hear your three.
All right. So, what?
Yeah, I know that I've only heard of one of them.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. I'll expand your horizons, David.
Right.
How the tables have turned. I tried to be varied in my selections to give an example of how diverse science fiction can be. And so these are not even like, you know, my top 3 all time, whatever. These are 3 really good books that I enjoyed. And they all come from different subgenres, if you will, of science fiction. So the first one I'm sure everyone has heard of, and this must be the one David's heard of, is Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams.
Never
Which, yeah, sure.
I've heard of it at least 42 times. I'm just saying.
Yes. Yeah, there are books, there are movies, there's all sorts of brilliant
Radio. There's radio too.
radio, exactly, absolutely, yeah. So I love this because it is, well, first of all, I love the humor. It's very funny. If you like funny books, you'll like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It is, the whole thing is basically a troll on humanity, I think.
Mhm.
And it is fertile ground for just brilliant quotes from Douglas Adams.
Yeah.
Just what this series has contributed to science fiction and literature in general, I think is extremely admirable. So wherever you start in it, you know, I started with just the first one, and then they came in like little mass market paperback books that you would buy at Borders for $3. And then I made my way through, buying the big tome, the collector's edition of all the books.
For those who don't know, there are 5 books in the trilogy.
What's that?
For those who don't know, there are 5 books in the trilogy.
5 books in the trilogy, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's what he said.
It's just, yeah. So I think it was one of the first books in science fiction I read, and it was a great beginner's book because as a young teenager, I could laugh at it, and the books were very bite-sized. You know, for me, I was a voracious reader, but even if you're not, they're very readable. So I recommend The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So that's my number 1.
Doug Adams, he was an amazing writer.
Douglas Adams, rest in peace. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, you probably wouldn't have a Neil Gaiman, maybe even not a Terry Pratchett. You probably wouldn't have all the nice.
He did
stuff.
it his way. You know, he's one of those authors that did it his way, and I love that about him. Okay, so then let's pivot. So so that's kind of like my my pop culture recommendation. My next recommendation, we're going to pivot to YA science fiction. There's a lot of them out there. I would say that science fiction and YA go hand in hand pretty well. But the one I'm going to recommend is one I haven't talked about much on this podcast, because I have talked about The Hunger Games and I've talked about Divergent, which are worthy of speaking about. But I'm going to recommend Matched by Ali Kandi, which is another dystopia. So it's soft science fiction, but it's in a trilogy. It's the first of the trilogy. The first one is the best in my opinion, and it gets, as some trilogies do. Wasn't a huge fan of the later ones, but I'm just talking about the first one now. It does a great job of marrying dystopia and poetry and just beautiful prose, wonderful writing. The story is about a dystopian society that limits what you read, limits what you do, and matches 17-year-olds with their life partner. So the government chooses, it's like arranged marriage by the government. And so the main character is matched with her best friend, but then, the image of another man pops up on the screen just for a split second and changes everything that she has ever understood about the society. And so she goes hunting for this man, figuring out why there was a glitch in the system, and everything unravels following suit. But again, this was one of my first books that I read in science fiction. As a teenager, I really liked it. It had some romance. It had, as it said, beautiful poetry from the real world, poets from the real world that she married into the prose. And it was just a great read. Second one was a pretty good follow-up, and then the third one I wasn't a huge fan of, but maybe it's just me. I seem to burn out by the time the third one comes in a trilogy. There's a seldom. What do you think?
A lot with trilogies, and I've seen it even more with YA trilogies. I'm not entirely sure why.
I don't know either. Like, I love The Return of the King, but I can't think of one, YA that I would recommend.
Lord of the Rings was a little different because, in my humble opinion, that was actually just one novel split into 3.
Yeah.
Because
technically split into 6, because I mean every novel had actually 2 books to it.
because then you'd have thousands of pages. Yeah.
Mhm.
But anyway, so that is my second recommendation. Is a YA science fiction called Matched. Yeah, and then so thirdly, thirdly, my third one is we're going to pivot to more of a classical hard sci-fi, which shows you again the flexibility of this genre, and that is Transcendental by James Gunn, who passed away December 2020, actually, pretty recently. And he's a pretty well-respected science fiction author. This was the first book that I'd read of his, and I believe it is part of a series, but I only read the first one. But I did like it a lot. It's about a traveling spaceship that's going to the edge of the universe, looking for this cultish and mystic legend of transcendentalism. And so it's like a bunch of pilgrims, basically. But the main character is not on his way for spiritual reasons. He is there to hunt down the prophet of transcendentalism and figure out what the real motives of the passengers are. So I like it because it's a contained environment. You're on the ship the whole time, and you have some really interesting passengers from different planets, different species, and they share their stories. So you get some interesting backgrounds for the first half of the book, and then the second half really speeds up with more of the action. So that was again, it's not a long book. I like science fiction that is not huge. I like being able to manage it. I call it bite size, but I really enjoyed it. Thicker writing, a little more, a little less prosy and poetry than Matched and the YAs I was used to reading. But I was ready to dive into something a little deeper and a little harder. And so being able to mix that deep space, I think it's actually called a space opera, technically, but being able to mix that was really, really cool. So those are my three. So I have Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, I have Matched, and I have Transcendentalism are my three recommendations this week. But next week I might have other recommendations. This is just
Right.
All
But our gentle viewers, please remember, we do have another episode that you may have seen about what are the best tropes in science fiction.
yeah.
Please watch that episode.
I've watched, just like Marty, I've watched more. So if we want to do another episode like this, I can give you three more that I like. But there you go.
It'd be fun to do these on some different topics.
We'll do fantasy next time.
Some of the writing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, having said that, our next participant will be Jeffrey.
Thank you so much. Yeah, because I mean, it's interesting. I thought about this a lot. It's a hard one for me because, ironically, I do like fiction. I do enjoy it. But I read more fantasy than I do science fiction because I read a lot of science fact, science, nonfiction to get my science fiction to be very hard. But that said, I do have my favorites, and I do a lot of short fiction writing. So I would like to lead off with a recent publication that you can actually find on the internet, Wiki History. Wiki History is an interesting story about a bunch of time travelers that are editing a wiki page about events that they are trying to change in history. One of them may kill Hirohito. Another one may try and change Hitler's life trajectory. And they keep rewriting history over everyone's wishes. And they keep saying, no one interferes with this now. We're going to lock this down. It's just a hilarious little romp through the ideas of time travel. And as those of you have been watching, you know that my novel is about time travel, and time travel is a favorite topic of mine.
We'll make sure we have a link to it in the comments below.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's a story that I often forget the name of, and so it's like, oh, what is it called? What is it called? What is it called? So there you are, dear viewer. Wiki History, look it up. Secondly,
I should also add that it's by Desmond Warzel.
Oh yes, thank you. Thank
yeah,
you.
And it's really funny. I mean, it's like ridiculous funny.
Right.
It's definitely worth the read.
Definitely, and not that long. Another short story, though, that I really liked, going back to Heinlein. Heinlein's first more or less published story is By His Bootstraps. Neat little story where the protagonist, Bob, goes and meets Bob. And he meets Bob again. And he meets Bob a third time. So it's a nice little romp that even though you see the story unfold as not necessarily linear, you follow it from the perspective of your protagonist, Bob, as he warps himself around time, figuring out what's going on until the last scene, which, of course, when we meet the, I'm not going to say.
Spoiler. No spoilers.
Yeah, but you know, it's more Bob. So please read that book. It's a very cool short story, and I'm sure you will enjoy it. So
technically a novella. It's about 20,000 words.
Yeah, it's not that long. I mean, there's like 2 hours worth of audiobook. And I read that recently because, of course, time travel. I wanted to get into it again. Sort of whetting my appetite. Third, though, I'm going to go for the full novel. And I sort of thought about a lot of novels that I could put for the third position. There's a lot of things I like, and I will certainly try to mention some of them in the honorable mentions. But for now, see, I like steampunk. My most recent story is a bit steampunky. And there's nothing more steampunk than Jules Verne or Jules Verne. And in this case, I'm going to go to 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Because when you go to that classic science fiction, you're getting to this whole other ethos. He's trying to write hard science fiction. It's just hard science fiction for the 1890s. You know, when they thought that Antarctica might be an ocean like the North Pole. And when they thought, you know, other things that may or may not have been, that you could have a vessel that was so big, or that you could have a whale that was so unmentionable.
I thought we categorized steampunk as one of the subgenres of fantasy in a couple episodes ago.
Well, we did mark it as but this one is
now?
This one is technically science fiction because in its era it was science fiction.
Science fiction in the late 1800s.
It was science fiction in the late 1800s. It's just it became steampunk because people were trying to emulate Jules Verne or Jules Verne. I mean, that's the thing. Where did we get steampunk from? We tried to emulate Verne, and so in a sense, it became its own fantasy from this science fiction novel, and others like it from Verne, and that's why I thought it would be a good one to mention.
Viewers, I'm going to let you in on the secret. Jeffrey is actually a time traveler from the 1870s. I'm convinced. And we're focused on time travel. That's my theory, and I'm sticking with it.
Verily.
All right. Well, now I'll give my three. For those who are grounded in some of the classic science fiction, you'll probably recognize the picture behind me. It was the original paperback edition of Rendezvous by Rama by Arthur C. Clarke in 1973. Had this as a fold-out interior cover. The artist is Dean Ellis, and I think this is a really cool picture of the inside of this spaceship. The premise is that an alien cylindrical spaceship is passing through the solar system at high speed and using the sun to change its course on its journey. It's clearly not staying in the solar system, and it's clearly a very high speed, but still not faster than light ship. There's only one ship in the solar system that's close enough to actually visit this alien spaceship, the first ever seen, the first ever encountered before it leaves the solar system. The thing I like about this is hard science fiction. It's so hard that the nuts and bolts are just like dropping from the sky, and it really comes across like a NASA mission. So I think it's a really realistic story. It may not have a super duper characterizations, but like I said, it's like the ultimate NASA mission. And I was fascinated the first time I read this story, and every time I've read it since. For me, it's one of those books that I recommend to somebody when they say, I'm interested in science fiction, but I don't know what to read. Oh, well, why don't you try to start with this? Because I think it's a very cool and an approachable novel. So Rendezvous by Rama by Arthur C. Clarke.
Rendezvous with Rama.
Rendezvous with Rama, sorry. Next up on my list is Pride of Chennai by one of my favorite writers, C.J. Cherryh. Now the premise to this story First of all, it's the first contact story told from the point of view of the aliens. You see, somebody has let some kind of weird, hairless alien creature off their ship at this interstellar space station where a whole bunch of different species meet. Well, that little alien species that's running around is actually a human. And the whole mystery is, how did he get here? And now that he's been found by the crew of the Pride of Chennai, what are they going to do with him, since every other alien species around is after them? It's hard science fiction. It's first contact from the other side. It's got adventure. It's got shipboard life. It's got commerce. It's got war. It's got everything you could possibly want in the story. It was nominated for a Hugo Award and should have won, in my humble opinion. It's probably my favorite science fiction book of all time. Highly recommended. And then finally, you can tell this has been read a whole bunch of times. It's kind of dog-eared. This is The Warriors Apprentice by Lois McMaster Bujold. This is the first story about Miles Vorkosigan. He is a noble from a warlike space empire. The thing is, his body was damaged in an assassination attempt when he was very, very young. So his bones are brittle and basically flunks out of military academy. So,
And he's a dwarf.
and he's a dwarf.
This damage actually happened when he was still in the incubator.
Yep.
Hmm.
So what's a guy to do? You flunked out of military school. You're a noble. You've got money. Why not start your own mercenary troop? What could possibly go wrong? It is great military science fiction. It's got a lot of humor in it. It's one of the first books. It's the first book about Miles Vorkosigan. That whole series has won 5 Hugo Awards, and the entire series itself has won a Hugo Award. So it's the most decorated series in science fiction history. Highly recommended. For those who are interested, this novel can be found secondhand, solo, or there's an omnibus edition right now called Young Miles that contains this book, the second book in the series, plus an award-winning novella, which is a good buy. So Young Miles, if you want to look for it on Amazon. I think these are 3 adventurous books and a fairly wide range of books that will give you a lot of fun and entertainment value.
Yeah, I think that The Warriors Apprentice is prime for like HBO. You know what I'm saying?
A series could be done. Each book could be a season.
That's right. And oh, what's the actor's name that's like perfect for the role? He was in Game of Thrones.
Oh, Tyron.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I drink and I know things.
Peter Dinklage.
Yeah, Peter Dinklage. He's awesome.
I got the character wrong anyway.
I love him. If you haven't seen the movie, go see the movie The Station Agent. Rent it. It's streaming somewhere.
Right.
Great movie. But he would be a perfect Miles Vorkosigan.
Okay, so I'm guessing some people might have a few honorable mentions. So I'll start with you, Marty.
Oh my God, I got so many, it's ridiculous. You know, there's just so many that are like epic and classic. You know, I just wandering through my library tonight, I'm going, oh my God, you know, Neuromancer. You know, there's so many. I Philip K. Dick, the Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? I just read that lately. I saw a copy of Flowers for Algernon, and it suddenly occurred to me it's science fiction. Let's see. Of course, the Dune books are all down there. Man in a High Castle. I think even Clockwork Orange can be considered science fiction. Alas, Babylon, which we talked about a couple weeks ago, that is definitely one of my all-time favorites. There's a ton of Highland that I'll just talk about a couple. Had Spacesuit Will Travel, you know, Starship Troopers, The Puppet Masters, all of those are really good. But like Arthur Clarke. I got a whole shelf of him. It's like Childhood's End. Oh my God, there's really awesome books there. And then all the other classics like my Ray Bradbury shelf. I mean, the Martian Chronicles alone, everybody should read those. They definitely gotta read that.
That was on my list too. I mean, but yeah, I'm kind of like David in terms of the quality.
Dave's going like this. And, there's a lot of those things that are on the classic list that people go like this, even me. Because, I thought about Canis Opal Leibowitz. Reading that again as an adult, I'm kind of going like this now because of how it's been. Fahrenheit 451, I just read that again. And it's not as good as I remember. I don't know if I'm just like jaded now, because I read so much, but I got a metric ton of honorable mentions. I mean, we could completely do a podcast every week talking about you love. Hey, this week I read that. This week I've read the 17th book by.
Well, I think what I found is that some books have a bit of a time period where, when Fahrenheit 451 came out, for example, it was groundbreaking. Groundbreaking now in light of all of the other stuff that's been published later and has dealt with some of our themes and stuff. You can't take away sometimes how groundbreaking something was when it first came out.
Yeah. I mean, there was a Stravinsky piece that was played. I know it's a little off topic, but there was a Stravinsky piece that played the first time, and the audience was aghast. But now everybody loves the piece.
Well, I can remember reading one of Ray Bradbury's short story called "The Pedestrian." Very esoteric, very, very good short story. And Jeffrey's list made me think of that.
Oh yeah.
Sorry.
I didn't prepare an honorable mention list. I didn't really think about it. I was making sure my three were solid. But the couple that came to mind real quickly, Gateway by Frederick Pohl. Also Earth Abides, which is about it, which is an apocalyptic story. People surviving when the human species has been so decimated that there is no possibility of keeping a technological civilization. It's more about just survival so the species survive. It's a very cool novel, and it's still, except for the fact that it doesn't even note that the cell phones aren't working or anything like that. That's the only thing that starts to make you realize that it was written in, I think, 1949. It's that good a novel.
Right.
All right, Shay, do you have anything else for us?
I think I mentioned this before, but I love The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula Le Guin. One of my favorites. Another YA that no one here has heard of, but our listeners may have. Marie Wu wrote the Legend series, very good. What else? Gosh, Marty mentioned some good ones. The Android Stream of Electric Sheep. It's a great one.
Very good one. Dick, Philip K. Dick, one of the best.
What'd you say?
I say Philip K. Dick, he's one of the best.
Has he written other books? I don't.
Yes, he's written the Android Stream of Electric Sheep. He's written
Man in the High Castle.
In the High Castle.
Oh, he wrote that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
The movie Blade Runner is based on Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?
Yeah. No, I knew that, but I didn't know that he also wrote The Man in the High Castle, which was an HBO series, right?
No, I think it was what's it called? Amazon.
Netflix or something, yeah.
The Minority Tom Cruise is based on.
But anyway, yeah, those are.
His work is made into probably more movies than just a self-writer.
That's good stuff. Well, I mean, may I? I'll just say a few things here. Like I did 1984. A lot of kids say, "Oh, I had to read that. I hated it." I didn't. I read it out of my own will, and I did enjoy it. And The Last and First Man by Stapleton. What's his name? Stapleton. Yeah. That I enjoyed. I enjoyed both of those books way back when I was just sitting in France and idling my time and just wanted something to read. And I also would mention, you know, because I love time travel, I didn't read all the Doctor Who novels, but I'm just doing some tie-ins. And the Time Warren series, from the first fully, there was no TV show on the air anymore, just novelizations of continuing the character. And the Time Worm series, where the first book was in the time of Gilgamesh, was very fascinating. The second book, in terms of the kind of a what if the Nazis had won, a what if kind of story. And then the third book, where it was very steampunky, or not steampunky, excuse me, cyberpunky. Don't get those confused. Cyberpunky. Those were very fun books to just give me a sampling of what else lay out there, because I read them when I was pretty young. So I give those as little honorable mentions on my account.
So if our viewers go out and get every single one of the books we've recommended and start reading, that should keep them busy for a while, at least until.
Yes. And there is actually one more Time Worm book that I didn't mention.
What book is that?
Oh, it's Revelation.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then there's Still Falling by Martin Wilsey. I don't know if we should mention that or not, but
Right.
I think it can just sneak onto our list.
Yeah. No, well, I mean, I really, to be honest, I really enjoyed Jerry Moore's The Music of Mars. I mean, it was a nice book that I read when he put it through the group.
Yeah, maybe we should do that as another topic some night. You know, your favorite indie authors.
Mm.
You know, your favorite book that nobody else has ever read.
Mm.
Oh, that would be fun.
Yeah.
All right, we have some ideas. I think it's just about time to wrap up this session. So, Marty?
Okay. That's another fine episode.